Hi, watch this video to see how we made this effect.
We're going to be looking at cutting the strips for our bias for our stained glass window strips. So we're going to be cutting on the bias, which is 45-degree angle to the straight edge. I'm just going to line up my bias cut, which I already have a bias cut on this piece of fabric, and I'm going to be making, I think I use 7/8 of an inch. So I'm just straightening that edge. So I have a pair of these. Now, depending on how light or heavy your fabric is, you need to actually just do a test with this. We want to thread our bias point into our puller. So I'm using a 9mm, so that gives me 18mm there. So 18mm is not quite 3/4 of an inch. But I know that this fabric is quite light, and so when you actually stretch it, it actually becomes thinner. So that's why I use 7/8 of an inch. But you need to test this. So we thread it up, and with a bit of steam and work relatively slowly, and just move it along, pin it into your board. Don't go too fast. The slower you go, the better the fold. Once you've created your strips, we need to apply them to our fabric. Now we have our fabric here that I've already started this. I'm going to do one more piece for you. This is a center panel. And so we're just going to be laying on our tape. And we're going to be doing all our short pieces first. So we have our numbered squares, our numbered pieces, panels. They've been glued together. But we have some shorts, so we need to do the short areas first, so as then we can do the long areas over top of them. So you'll see what I'm going to do once I start. There's no rhyme or reason, but I need to do the short ones first, so as that they are done, so the tape will cover the raw ends when I go over them on the other seam. So let's just start. Now the fold underneath the tape sits on the seam, on the raw edge of the seam. And we're just going to stitch on one edge. You can put a pin in to hold it into place. I find it easier when doing this to actually just hold it with my fingers, but you can pin it if you wish. So using an open toe foot, swing your needle to the left hand position and use the toe of the foot to actually run along the edge of your tape. Sometimes you've got to swing your needle in a little bit. Trim off your excess. And you'll see that when I do this, I come across my seams. I go down the seam and then turn and then go up the other side of the tape. And that's where I cut to. So I'm going to do that top corner there. So all the short bits I need to do first. So stitch, stitch, stitch. Excuse my hand. Now these seams have got curves on them, so they're not straight, so you do need to actually manipulate the tape as you go. One more, and turn, and let the foot go along the edge of the tape. Now you can buy this tape pre-made. It's at 7 or 8 millimeters. It doesn't matter how wide it is. And you can buy it, and it's actually got a sticky back on it, so you can actually iron it into position if you wish. Now, I haven't been able to find it here in Australia, but I remember I used to use it years ago, and it did have a sticky back on it. I'm presuming that is still available in America. So let's just carry on and do the next short bit. So I'm doing all the interconnecting lines, so we have our starts and stops completed, so as we can put another piece of tape over top of the raw edges. As you can see, I'm covering this one here with my tape. Stop on my seam, stitch down my seam, turn and stitch the other way, other edge of that tape. And then trim your ends. So that one's completed. I've got no more joins inside. I can actually carry along and do this one. Now this one's quite curved. Excuse the fuzziness. This one's quite curved, so need to make sure the center of the tape is going to run over the intersection of the one that's already been stitched down. And we come out into our seam allowance, and I come out to the 1/4 inch basting, because these blocks have been basted twice. The first row of basting, as you'll see in the notes, is in a generous 1/2 inch, almost 5/8, with the batting attached to the fabric. Then we trim our batting back, and then we put it back on, and then we just stitch 1/4 inch around the outside edge to hold the back on to place. And so we actually stitched that 1/4 inch line when we were out into our seam allowance. Because the basting line that's sitting on the inside will be removed before we construct the bag panels. So I need to do that one because we've got an interconnecting line at the top. Now, gentle curve. Because it's on the bias, the curve is easy to actually manipulate around the seam. But I'm making sure that that central fold underneath the tape is sitting on the cut line. Oops, fuzzy. Sorry. Trim and trim. That one's done, so let's do one more. So my edge of my foot is running along the edge of my tape. Now I've put my needle all the way to the right, but I have moved it in, I think, 2 clicks, just so as it's sitting easier on the tape. Otherwise it's very easy to run off the edge. If you don't feel confident about doing this with a straight stitch, then do a shallow zigzag. It doesn't matter. As long as you don't see the stitch needs to stay inside the tape. I have seen some people use a twin needle to do this. Now, that's how we used to do it years ago. We used to use a wide twin needle, but our tape was quite fine. I don't always use all sections of the tape, because sometimes when you're dealing with the bias, you'll find that the tape goes from fat to thin, and so if I find that I've got a thick section, I will actually not use that to stitch it on. Try and keep it as even as possible. So we're almost complete. We have this one and we have one more. This one again is a curved one. So it's a slight S of a curve. This is quite fun and it's exceptionally effective. You don't have to use black. Stained glass does not have to be black. It can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't even have to be the tape. It could be a braid. It could be a lace. You can see that I've got a fat piece at the end there, so I'm going to cut that piece off. And then I'm going to start in from the edge. Now this is quite a shape seam, this one, so you need to actually place it in sections or pin it in sections depending on how you're working. I do find when I use pins on doing this, I do actually get little pleats and puckers, but that's just my handling because I'm not used to using pins. The scissors I'm using actually quite funny. They're actually a dog grooming scissor. Now I've got a curved blade and a straight blade, and it's just, I find those easier to use. They look like theatre scissors that you'd use in surgery because they've got quite a long arm in them. I just find that the holes for my fingers, I don't get my fingers stuck in them. So there we are, this is completed.
He wants to say thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and you learnt some more about how to use bias tape. Go visit So Sweet Pea for more vlogs on this.